Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the June 12th Design Review Commission work session to order. Can I have the roll, please?
Sample. Routine. Mark.
Here.
Aguilar. Here. Zuckerman. Here. Ersted.
Here.
Bull.
Here.
Thank you.
5 present, 2 absent.
Thank you. Really have one item tonight. It's DRH 23-00370 at 1111 West State Street. With that, I'll turn it over to staff for their presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. This is a design review work session to review the project updates for the previously approved Block 16-9 North project. Just to give you a quick background here, this project is to construct a new 7-story mixed-use building with ground floor commercial and 222 residential units at 1111 West State Street in a C5DD zone. And this project was reviewed under the Legacy Zoning Code. At January 10th, 2024 design review hearing, this project was approved with conditions to return to a future work session to review exterior details at 50% CD level at a final concept for the proposed paint scheme. The applicant has submitted a design package with advanced design for your review and a request to modify the paint scheme condition for your consideration. So this was approved site plan. And in your packet, you can find a set of revised renderings with more details added to the pedestrian realm and the window treatments. This was the rendering presented before. And this is the revised rendering with the second floor window paneling, minor changes there, and also the minor changes to the street level planter place. The applicant has also provided enlarged elevations of each corner transections with side finishing details added as well. And this is cornered of State and 12th to the bike room. And this is a commercial corner of State and 11th Street. In addition to the renderings, there are construction drawings of the exterior plan and window details included in your packet. And the applicant has also prepared a presentation. You will hear the specifics from them shortly. So as for the paint scheme requirements, the applicant and developer team has requested your consideration to modify condition C, considering the project time and their ongoing collaboration with City of Boise's Arts and History Department to an art in public process for the paint scheme concept. The current condition requires the applicant to satisfy the requirement with return to this work session with a final concept, which is also required to satisfy prior to building permit issuance. The applicant finds that is somewhat not feasible to achieve prior to the building completion, as the paint scheme will only be installed after the building is completed. Given the project timeline, it will likely be in the spring of 2026. The applicant team finds that it is difficult to have an artist committed to a work that far ahead of time, as things may change between now and 2026. However, the applicants understand that these two paint schemes are such important pieces of work for the project as well as downtown Boise. A careful selection of the concept and the execution is a must. Therefore, the applicant has initiated a collaborative effort with Arts and History. The applicant is committed to lead a competitive selection process with Art and History's expertise on reviewing the RFP qualification of the artist and the contents of the paint scheme for artistic and maintenance purposes. Since the process will be informed by Arts and History Department, the applicant team has requested to modify condition C to reflect that. Planning staff is in support of this request and has also added additional condition language in there for circumstances that if the applicant team failed to go through a collaborative process with Arts and History for the concept, they will need to return to a future design review work session with a final paint scheme concept for approval prior to installation. With that, the planning staff recommends your approval of the work session document submitted and approval for them to modify the condition C as proposed. That concludes my presentation, and I will give the floor to the applicant unless you have any questions for me.
Great, thank you. Any questions for staff at the moment? Nope. Thanks. The applicant like to come forward? If you would please state your name and address for the record.
Hello, there we go. All right. Am I to click through this or are you planning on? I don't know. I don't want to mess that up. Is it the green button? I know I screwed that up last time I did this. Okay. So this will probably be fairly short and sweet. As I believe from the previous design, we really strive to keep what we presented continuous through the design process. I think the big takeaway and one of the things I heard from last time was dealing with venting through the facade, like what happens when you take all your exhausts from your bathroom or your dryers and take it through the facade, and how that can really mess up what looks like a clean rendering and clean facade. And we did manage to, on all of the metal skin, which is facing 11th Street, 12th Street, and State, that all that's going vertical, so that will not have penetrations through it. You can kind of see in this rendering around the windows that there's a part that looks like a solid white or light color that is an integrated louver, and I'll get to the details on that. And that is integrated into the window system. So that is the penetration where our HVAC is coming from. And that's the only penetration, but that is associated with the window itself. And then also I just think that because of the clean lines and the nuanced articulation of this building with our, as you see, going up, is that the second floor, the third and fourth floor, and then the 3 floors above that, each kind of having a different profile in the metal. So as that articulates, as it goes up and kind of crescendos up the building, I think is highlighted now by the fact that we definitely are not going to have any penetrations. Obviously at the ground floor, we've been maintaining the same thing that we showed before, the glazed tile at the entries, at the important points of the building, the lobby entry for the residents, and then at the commercial as well as the bike room entry, to kind of highlight and activate those spaces. And then the wood soffit expressing that, and then the articulation of the softening at the ground floor with the planters around the facade or around the ground floor, along with the benches as well. And the discussion around the mural already happened. So I think, and that's again why I kind of showed a different mural here, is because we're kind of not there yet. So I'm trying to understand what that is. These are kind of, I think, the areas that highlight the details. I think I don't know that I can zoom in here on this one. But I think the big one that we're kind of trying to point out is the window detail around the smaller windows where we have at the bedroom. We're really protruding those out. So those are going to be differentiated from some of the other windows. So there is going to be kind of a play of depth on those. So those are kind of like a picture frame, shadow box kind of window. So those stick. The siding itself is about 1.5 inches deep, and then we go about 4 inches past that in those. So in depth from where the window is, you're probably looking at around 6 inches of depth to the window in those elements. And that kind of gets, you can kind of see at these windows here at the bedrooms as they go around are the ones that will have that extension of the window frame. And then I think the other thing that was really wanting to be pointed out was just that, and it's probably hard to see in here too, but just the integrated louver system within the window, and that it's not just a flat panel on the window system. And I'll take any questions if you want. I'm trying to think if there was anything else. I think that was the last one. And yeah, that's just the articulation of the bench that we had before. I think before we just had a panel that went all the way across, but just working with the system, this is the one that we've selected to work with.
Great, thank you. Questions from the commission for the applicants?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Stad.
renderings can be, whatever we want them to be, but I want to know on the underside of that soffit, you've got the linear wood pattern that's parallel to the face for the main mass, and then it comes perpendicular to the face on the other mass. Is that intentional, or is it so that's kind of the smaller mass there? Yes, that shows it. It's parallel to the 11th Street face, but perpendicular to the State Street face. Is the intent there to match it to the other mass, or to keep it like that? Miter the corner?
No, I don't think we want to miter the corner because it's not equal setback. So
Right.
then you'd get a weird angle that comes into not a corner. So we wanted to create a directionality with it. And since the forms are kind of broken at that point and go back to where the courtyard is, we felt stepping it or changing it in rotation would be a nice dynamic.
And then the metal band there that kind of separates the top of the first floor from the rest of it. Is there conceptually a reasoning for that, or is it just a nice clean detail that pulls everything between the two together?
Yeah, I mean, I think it gives the connection or the intention of where these elements happen for the tile. So it gives a place for that to kind of nestle in as it wraps down to the ground, as well as it's going to create essentially an area for where we can put lighting to light that soffit. So it really kind of creates that separation from that wall as well, is the intent.
My own, this is a personal opinion, but I think at the location in the center of the block where you got the courtyard above, it's kind of cut through, it would, yeah, that's probably your best elevation of showing it. Just to kind of marry those two different typologies together, if you could bring that wood cladding up and have it overlap that, I think it would tie the building more together as a composition. I think it's interesting that we've got the wood siding there around your amenity space on the second floor. But then it doesn't really connect down because you still have that band that goes between the second floor and the first. Does that make sense? Or is it, I'm just kind of like talking in circles?
No, I mean, I understand your opinion on that. I think we were tying the amenity space that's at the ground floor up to the second floor, and that wood wraps around into the courtyard as well. So we also have storefront windows at that second level. So that's really trying to create that distinction of those two elements as you look up, that they have a relationship together, even though it's tied into the volume of the upper mass. But
Was there any consideration of pulling that amenity space back from the State Street facade a little bit, since you've got that different in style and material application? And it's a PT deck, you can kind of do whatever you want with the shape.
yeah, I think that's a good thought. I think where we're at, we were trying to create that extension overhang to the entry lobby. So really creating some protection at that level. But I think that's something to think about. But I think where we're at is just the amount of amenity space we have up there. I think we're kind of pushing it, I guess. So we'd have to look at it.
Other questions for the applicant?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any members of the public wishing to testify on this item here tonight? Or any online, Josh? Nope. Hearing none, we'll close the public portion of the meeting and bring it to the commission for discussion and a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes. Secretary-
I just wanted to react to what Commissioner Erstat said. I think that the current amount of recess and overhang is just right. And I really like how it's done in this scheme.
Other thoughts, comments?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Ball.
Yeah, I love the ground level of this building. I think they've done a really nice job kind of addressing the street. I love the overhangs. The use of tile, I think, is really nice. You typically don't see that, especially in Boise. So, and then the fact that they're willing to go and work with the arts and history department on kind of an RFP, I think is great.
Great, thanks. Last comments at all? Also appreciate the effort to put all that exhaust up through the roof. I think it does keep that form nice and clean. So, well, anybody want to make a stab at a motion then? I think everybody's on board with the proposed modification for condition C. So just maybe state that in your motion. Or any other discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes. Ms.
I'd like to move that we approve DRH 23-00370. Modifications as presented in this work session.
With modifications to condition C.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Is there and a second? Thank you, Ms. Zuckerman. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Noel, you call the roll?
Marsh,
Aye.
Aguilar,
Aye.
Zuckerman,
Aye.
Ersted,
Aye.
Bull,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate your efforts on this, guys. Josh, want to go over the agenda real quick and then?
Yes, Mr. Chair, this will be pretty brief. So tonight we have first up a time extension. Just as a reminder, those are not public hearings, but we will need a motion from the commission on that. Then we have our two as of late common deferrals. Items 1 and 2 are both requesting deferral to the date to the next hearing, which is July 10th, date specific. And then we will hear item 3.
Okay.
And with that, we'll see you here in 25 or so minutes.
Great. Thanks, Josh. Good evening. I'd like to call the June 12th, 2024 Design Review Commission meeting to order. Noel, can you please call the roll?
Simple. Rudine. Marsh.
Aye, here.
Aguilar.
Aye. Here.
Zuckerman.
Here.
Erstad.
I am here.
Bull.
I am also here.
5 present, 2 absent.
Thank you. I'd also like to take a motion for the Design Review Commission meeting minutes for May 8th, 2024, and the Design Review Commission work session meetings for the same date.
I move that we approve the commission meetings minutes from May 8th, 2024, as well as the commission work session meeting minutes.
So
Second.
moved. And second, thank you, Ms. Aguilar. Any discussion? Hearing none, Noel, you please do a roll call vote?
Marsh.
Yes.
Aguilar.
Yes.
Zuckerman.
Aye.
Erstad.
Yes.
Bull.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
We have one item up here that's for a time extension. It's item DRH 22-00156, location 7585 West Fairview Avenue. It's for a request for a 1-year time extension for a project previously approved in the Design Review Committee on June 8th, 2022 for the construction of a new approximately 2,700 square foot oil change facility with associated site improvements in a C1 DDA zone. So with that, I'd be looking for an motion for approval of the time extension.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Ms. Zuckerman.
I move to approve the time extension for item DRH 22-00156.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Stad. Second. Any discussion on the time extension motion? Hearing none, Noel, you please do a roll call vote?
Marsh.
Yes.
Aguilar.
Aye.
Zuckerman.
Aye.
Erstad.
Aye.
Bull.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
All right, we now are looking for a motion on deferrals. We have 2 items. First item for the deferral to the July 10th meeting is item number 1, DRH 23-00391. Location is 6614 West State Street. And the second item is item number 2. It's DRH 24-00037. Locations 3150 West Main Street. At this time, I'd be looking for a motion for the deferral of those 2 items to the July 10th, 2024 date.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Ms. Zuckerman.
I move to defer to July 10th, the following 2 items. DRH 23-00391 and item DRH 24-00037.
Okay, so moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bull. Any discussion on the motions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I will be abstaining from voting on item DRH 24-00037.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ted. With that, Noel, will you please do a roll call vote?
Marsh.
Aye.
Aguilar.
Aye.
Zuckerman.
Aye.
Erstad.
Yeah.
Bull.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Great. Now we'll move on to our first item to be heard tonight. It's item number 3. It's DRH 24-00118. Location is 3600 West Americana. At this time, I turn it over to Caitlin for your reports.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. This is a request for a 200-unit condo project located at 3600 West Americana Terrace in the MX3 mixed-use active zone. This application was submitted and reviewed under the modern zoning code. The property is located at the west end of Americana Terrace, west of Americana Boulevard, and north of Catherine Albertson Park and Settlers Canal. The Boise River and Greenbelt run along the north. The applicant is proposing to construct a private road with a public use easement extending from Americana Terrace through the center of the site. Buildings 1 and 2 will be located on the north side of the road, and buildings 3 and 4 and a clubhouse building are proposed on the south side of the road. A publicly accessible plaza will be created between buildings 1 and 2 with a connection to the Boise Greenbelt. The applicant is placing commercial tenant spaces and resident amenities facing the plaza and the Greenbelt to meet the active frontage requirements in the modern zoning code. Structured parking is provided on the first and second levels, and floors 3 through 6 contain condo units. The landscape plan includes substantial landscaping along the Greenbelt, the public plaza, and the resident amenity areas. The landscape design and improvements adjacent to the Greenbelt will also be approved by Boise Parks. This is an aerial perspective from the west looking east. The buildings will comply with the maximum 70-foot height allowance in the MX3 zone, and each of the buildings includes large balconies and windows. The 4 condo buildings have a similar appearance and utilize the same material palette. These are the elevations for Building 1 located at the northeast of the site. The building materials include CMU block, breeze block, metal panel, a ribbed metal siding, and stucco. The materials provide a variety of textures and scales, and colors will complement the surrounding vegetation. The applicant is requesting some modifications to the recommended conditions of approval. So for site condition C, they are requesting the recorded public use easement can be provided prior to occupancy rather than prior to permit issuance. For condition letter D, they are requesting that a clubhouse or similar amenity space will be provided at the first occupancy phase instead of the current language that specifies the clubhouse. And condition O, they would like reworded to specify that written approval is only required for buildings or pervious improvements adjacent to the canal for any encroachment or modification into the Settlers Irrigation District easement. The planning team finds the proposed modifications to be acceptable. So we would recommend approval of DRH 24-118 per the conditions in the project report with the revised site-specific conditions for C, D, and O. I can stand for any questions, and the applicant team is available to give a presentation.
Great. Thank you, Caitlin. Any questions for staff from the commission at this point?
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
could-
Mr.
Could
Scott.
we go back to that last page real fast? For item C, since the applicant is the one granting the easement, can we amend that to include that the easement needs to have at least been proposed prior to issuance of construction document construction permit?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Erstat, yes, that would be something we could do. We could have them provide like a draft easement document and the location of the easements prior to approving the construction permits, and then they grant the easement prior to occupancy.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for applicant? Or sorry, for staff? Seeing none, invite the applicant forward too, if you want. Please state your name, address for the record, please.
Good evening. For the record, I'm Shellen Rodriguez with SMR Development, 520 West Idaho here in Boise. Thank you for having us. Thank you, Caitlin, for the thorough staff report and for like a tremendous amount of patience for me over the last, with me over the last few weeks, kind of getting where we are today. It's very exciting for this team. This site is owned by Doug Jao. He's a local developer, local contractor. He has over 50 years of experience, both developing and constructing residential and commercial spaces throughout the valley. Unfortunately, he's not here with us today, but our architect, Chris Dwyer with POS Architecture, is here, and he's probably going to be the one to go through the bulk of this presentation and answer your questions. Do I do this? Great. So we do recommend, or we do agree with the recommendations, particularly the revisions to C, D, and O, especially as further clarified. That all works great for us. Quickly, I mean, really, Caitlin said all this, so I won't repeat ourselves as much as to set the stage. You see where the site is in proximity to the parks along the Greenbelt and the river. You'll see, we'll dive into these images more later this evening, but At the end of the day, the development team's vision is to not only create a community, but create a mix of spaces that the MX3 zone calls for, public and private spaces for not only residents, and these are homeowners, to enjoy, but also for the public to enjoy. And again, I want to just comment on where this site is. It's obviously close to the core of downtown, but if you look at it in the aerial, it is really a very serene spot tucked between the Catherine Albertson Park and the vegetation that exists between the site and the greenbelt and the river. In this particular area, there's quite a bit of space. It's close to the greenbelt, but then there's quite a bit of space from the greenbelt to the river, if that makes sense. So it's the end of Americana Terrace and a court, and it is a much more natural feeling environment than, say, just a few miles, just up on the bench, or even a few hundred yards in any really direction across the river. It's just much more, I don't want to say suburban, but less urban feeling. So really quick, our plan, just to reiterate what Caitlin said, it does meet the MX3 zone. It meets the parking requirements with the sustainability incentive, meets the height requirements, meets setbacks, and meets the 60% active ground floor activation rule. We are using that sustainability incentive that's in the new zoning code in order to maximize our parking. We will be coordinating with Parks, as she mentioned, and where we can access the greenbelt and how that feels and looks, just to make sure it's safe, but also inviting. Coordination with CCDC in the public plaza area. This is in the Shoreline Urban Renewal District. So we've met with them initially, and we look forward to continuing to work with them on this project. So with that, I will turn it over to Chris to talk through the design.
Thank you, Chris. You would state your name and address for the record.
Chris Dwyer, architect, Foss Architecture, 911 West Jefferson, Boise. That good? Cool. So yeah, as Shellen was saying, we have a really unique site that's, just surrounded by nature, surrounded by water almost. And as you get up above the trees and into the trees, the views out in every direction are quite breathtaking, and we intend to take advantage of those for the people who inhabit the buildings. I'll go to some site photos just for context. To the west, we have that trestle bridge, now pedestrian, former train bridge, and that just adds another unique, already existing element to our site. And we have building 2 that gets close to it, but that bridge will be quite dynamic across almost every building on our site. It's relatively flat, and we will have floodplain to obviously comply with, and that would involve raising our ground plane to allow that to happen. We have Settlers Canal that's kind of moving around, snaking around to the south, and it's just we feel a really dynamic site. And as we get into the plazas and how we oriented the buildings, they both take advantage of views out from each other. They set up very few, I guess you could say, unattractive views with each other. And the remaining space is, I think, unique because each building has a different relation to each other, and that frames 2 plazas. The one to the north near the Greenbelt is intended to be more public interfacing. The one to the south between buildings 3 and 4 is more project oriented. And then we have our community space near the clubhouse that's kind of the more traditional pickleball pool community building. Sorry, here's a little bit closer view of those, but we envision that as people are in either of these plazas, again, the buildings are framing the views away from the site, and as best we can, we're not dead ending two ends of the plaza. There's always a grand kind of view out of our site. Connectivity, we are close to downtown. This is just kind of a quick demonstration. Obviously, we're right adjacent to the Greenbelt. We have multiple bus lines and bus stops in close proximity that can be accessed with relative ease by pedestrians, walking out of this project. And then we have a lot of connectivity on our site to access the Greenbelt with, of course, the care of not creating a traffic hazard or confusion as people are going up and down the Greenbelt past our site. Where we are, as Shellen said, we are at the maximum parking allowed. We're using the sustainability side of things to, or this sustainability allowance to meet that. For us, being for a for sale residential product, parking is important. From activation, we have a private drive through the site. It's essentially an alleyway, driveway, if you will. So our public interface is the Greenbelt. And so we are trying to maximize our interface with the Greenbelt the best we can. On building 1, which is the upper right, we have townhome units at the east end, and then we have some exposed garage. Then we have site amenity or project amenities and leasable space on the north and west of that building. So we're primarily screening the garage from the Greenbelt with that building. Building 2 has leasable space on the east, and then bike repair and some other activation on the north facade. And so we are exceeding the required 60% of activation, and we think it's located appropriately. This is still somewhat a work in progress. We assume the project's going to be phased. We are just trying to buy ourselves the maximum flexibility that we can, but that's all kind of TBD once we get past this step and we see, what market conditions are dictating. So we'll jump into some perspectives. We are, as we stated, we view that we are a very surrounded by nature site. And so we are trying to use a material palette that doesn't distract from nature and complements it well. We are also using a lot of, I know on the right, it looks like a lot of materials, but a lot of this is textural differences. We may have a split face block and then a smooth face block next to each other with subtle tonal differences. And we really want the buildings, they are, large. There's only 4 of them for 200 units. And we want them to be, not a massive volume. We wanted to erode the facades, especially once you get above the parking levels. But at the parking levels, we didn't want a flat face. So we're undulating planes inward, outward. We have different materials. We envision allowing plants to grow up this over time to further screen the parking from people. And then as we get to the units, there are a lot of undulations that we're using in the building facade. This allows for privacy of the owners out. It allows for large decks for the owners. It also allows, as somebody moves around the building, you're not seeing a flat facade that goes for, an extended amount of lineal distance. And as the sun kind of comes around the site with all the recesses and overhangs and different roof treatments, we're allowing the sun to constantly change and shadow to change the facade for people, further out in a way from our site. The roofs, we are, again, it kind of goes back to, we don't want a straight flat line roof edge at the top of this. So we're using gable roof forms in different ways on every building. And then we have what are shown as flat roof planes, but of course they'd be kind of parapets and some would have overhangs and some wouldn't. And really our ridge beams of the gable hit 70. So everywhere else that's not gabled is below 70. So we're not trying to max out 70 feet straight across. We're trying to step this building up and down vertically to bring the scale down. We have some colonnade detailing if you're on the Greenbelt that would kind of create a little bit of a loggia for amenity and leasable space. It would provide shade for people stopping. You can start to get the illusion that landscape's developing for bringing people softly off the green belt and allowing them to get off their bike or whatever they're on, not in the line of traffic. You know, kind of really dynamic views no matter where you are on this site once you get into the unit levels. And this is the public facing plaza, the green belt's behind us. You know, again, a lot of unique sitting conditions, maybe some fire elements. And you can see how the buildings are starting to frame in this plaza, the view north to the river, and especially when the leaves are off the trees to the foothills beyond. And, you know, we think that the way we've carried the decks, we don't stack them straight up all the way. At the 6th level, we've changed some of the stepping of the building and the deck orientations for increased, I think, attractiveness to these buildings. And that's about it. So thanks for listening, and we're available for questions and comments.
Great, thank you very much. Questions from the commission for the applicant?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Gerlach.
what kind of mechanical systems are you proposing here? Are they in the wall or on the roof, and where are they going to be at? And what are you going to do for screening if they are on the roof?
They will most likely be on the roof, and there'll be the little units. We haven't engaged our MEP, so it's still somewhat to be determined at this point, but the way the model reads right now, it looks like they're flat planes, so the units would be on top, but it'll actually step down and create a trough all the way through the building. And so we don't anticipate any units sticking up above that. And if they do, we will address it with some screening.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Ball.
Chris, thanks for the presentation. The split face CMU, can you identify where that's located on the building?
Yeah. It's more down at the parking garage, which we probably didn't show a great perspective of. So it's hard to tell. What do I point with? Does this have a laser thing?
Yeah.
That one. So it's hard to tell, but this plane at the garage would be the split face. But at the garage level, we have both breeze block and split face and metal screen, like a metal mesh system. So it's not one material alone at the garage, but the split face will primarily be at the garage levels.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions from the commission?
Could we, they're not in your presentation, but the city's presentation might have the first floor plans at a higher scale.
So it goes building by building through the first floor. So I don't know if you
Right.
specifically.
So this is building 1, which is on the eastern edge, correct?
Correct, yes.
And by and large, I think you guys have done a really good job with, as you've talked to the undulation and breaking up these kind of forms and these, some of the longer linear runs. There are still a couple pieces there towards the eastern end. You know, your building's 330 feet long. That's still, you know, a pretty long stretch, even if it's just half of it, where that shows right now is a singular flat wall against the grain belt, and again against the other side of the building. I'm just wondering, I know you guys kind of played with the landscaping as you go and build out the renderings, but is there a contemplation of a specific type of greenery? You know, are you looking for like a columnar evergreen to go in there and kind of create a little more rhythm, or, you know, some clumps of an evergreen that will be there and just kind of break that up more? Or is, do you kind of take those columns there and create a couple more pilasters along that
Mhm.
facade to just kind of continue breaking that line up? I know
Yeah.
some of my counterparts really like really long lines, but from a pedestrian scale, it starts to be a bit large.
Right. Yes, I'm a little out of my wheelhouse with the species of plants, but yes, we have been talking with Stack Rock about adding different tree forms, vines potentially. We have the gym, which is an amenity that we are discussing having outside people be able to like host a yoga class and bring people from the Greenbelt or, if they drove there into the class. There would be another, it's not showing on ours, but there would be another extension of that gym space that has overhead doors that changes the planting to more of a paver and somewhat raised. And then I agree, we can look at extending this column line down further to kind of help break that up. That column line's about 1.5 stories above the ground, so it breaks the horizontal of the 2-story parking garage. And then these townhouse units on the end that we're calling them, the parking deck pulls back. So those are fully 2 stories and kind of, again, erodes that connection of a floor plate in the middle there. And same kind of goes with building 2. We can look at extending the colonnade on building 2. We are also, and it's some of our early discussions with CCDC talking about, is there an art installation, a history/art installation that can fold people off of the Greenbelt and into that facade of the building? So we are kind of actively looking at that. And then, of course, with having, this one shows it a little better, it's a shorter building, but having the horizontal planes of the garage walls step in and out, again, we're just trying to break it up.
And is
Best we
that
can.
breeze block there at the end?
Yeah,
Kind of the
it
dash
looks
line?
like dash, it's hard
Yeah.
to tell on these, but yeah, it should be. So in this building, we would envision an art or something somewhere along this wall. It may not be the entire run of it, but somewhere in that general area.
Do you want to see an elevation? Do we have an elevation of that side on those, a flat
I
elevation?
mean, I don't really want to see it because I think they just are awful looking, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Probably should. Yeah, not ours. It's the elevations in general. They're my least favorite drawing, so it's impossible for us to see it that way, so I
Yep.
look at it like that.
Other questions for the applicant at all?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Chris, you mentioned this sustainability incentive. Could you expand on what you guys are doing to meet that incentive?
Yeah, so, and I think some of it, to be honest, is going to fold in more when we engage, especially MEP, but we are exploring, or not, we are under the understanding that, we can't have gas appliances in the units. We can have fire pits or barbecues elsewhere as amenity, but we're looking at not having gas appliances within the units. Obviously, we've seen some of the bird's eyes. There's a lot of roof to this building. Over time, maybe the opportunity to add solar to this because there are so many units in theory with so many electrical appliances. A solar addition could be something that we look at. Of course, your water usage is going to be kind of top of mind as something to help minimize with appliances. Are you going to jump in, say anything too?
I just would add, I think we're intending to meet the sustainability incentives that are in the code for MX3, which is essentially all electric utilities in the units, as well as meeting the city's green building code. So we haven't gotten the MEP on board yet, or structural, or all the details of landscaping, but all those are things that tie into the city's green building code. So it's high level, but I wanted to keep it there because we don't really know yet.
Yeah, and we've our landscape has already reduced the sod and lawn areas quite substantially to more native fescue. So.
Other questions? All right, thank you very much. Josh, is there a neighborhood association on this one, do you know? Or is there anybody from the neighborhood association willing to testify on this item tonight? Nope, okay. Are there members of the public wishing to testify to this item tonight? Seeing none in person, any online, Josh? No? Anything else the applicant would want to say before we close the public portion? Okay, well, we will close the public portion of the hearing, bring it back to the commission for discussion of the motion.
Mr. Chair. Oh, go ahead.
Yes,
Dana.
go ahead, Dina.
So I'm having a hard time with this one more than usual. I think the location is phenomenal, and I don't think we have anything else like it anywhere. And because of that, I expected the building on it to be exceptional. And I think it's fine. And I think it does all the things a building is supposed to do. I think the setbacks are nice. I think the undulation's nice. I think the materials are nice. But I wanted something so much more. Like I wanted it to be something that would come in my Instagram feed when I look at architecture. And it just looks like a slightly nicer version of a suburban apartment complex. And I think it's confused about whether it's suburban or urban, which I get because of the location, but it's sort of acting like it's both. Like it looks like a little bit of a resort community kind of thing, which is weird for the location. Like if you were entering McCall and you saw it, you'd be like, oh, that makes sense. But it doesn't make sense to me where it is. Because it looks to me like I get the whole we're blending in with nature, but maybe this isn't fair, but if you look at what Chinese architects are doing, if you look at a lot of Chinese architecture on Instagram, like they're doing really, really cool things that work with nature and also are like, will knock your socks off. And that's what I was hoping for with this site, to see something that like, we've just never seen anything like it. Not that it just does a really good job of, you know, having the shade change and fitting into the surroundings and those kind of things. So like, I don't think there's anything wrong. I just wanted to be wowed because of the site. And I think also, well, some of us remember the days, you know, 10, 15 years ago where we were just like dying for any housing to go up anywhere in or around downtown. And so we were glad to take anything, and we're not at that spot anymore. I mean, we obviously still need a lot of housing, but I feel like the standards have changed. And yeah, and maybe to be a little bit selfish, I wanted to look at this and wanted to want to live there. And looking at it, I'm like, it's sort of like, not a dig at you guys who own it, I believe, but the whatever landing that's between the lake and the river. Yeah, down State Street. I can't remember the name of that place, but it's just not special. Like the location is special, but the building is not doing the location justice. And yeah, and so it pains me to see that.
Thank you, Ms. Zuckerman. Other people's thoughts, comments? Jessica?
Mr. Chair. I don't disagree with Dana. I like the material palette. I think there's a lot of potential here. I think what's hard for me right now is because it's conceptual, and for sure, whatever the motion is tonight, I would say you need to come back at 50%, and that's typical for pretty much all of our projects of this size. And maybe what would help if there's just some more detail here, because it just from a textual standpoint, it looks just flat. And maybe just stronger, better details. I don't know, maybe some of the material gets flipped around. I don't know. yeah, there's just not quite enough information here to make me want to like fall in love with this. Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
to kind of take a stab at putting some of these into more actionable terms, I think, and maybe my interpretation of past comments are not necessarily on point. But I think there is a lot going on in these buildings. There's a lot of planar changes. There's a lot of roof line changes. There's a lot of different approaches. But I think there's a kind of a lack of a clarity in any of them. I think that starting to sort of unify these masses into slightly better defined, give them their own set of rules. What you've got your metal siding, have that be a little bit more clearly defined. Have its own rule for a railing. Have its own rule for fenestration. Give them, but at the same time, have them be less broken up. I think your packet refers to an urban style and an urban product. Well, if you look at an urban environment, you don't see a building that has 6 different types of material over it that all come in at different levels, or at least not without a very, very clear thesis behind that. But you do see, a moderately sized building that has its own set of rules, and immediately next to it is another moderately sized building, has its own set of rules. So I think coming back to a more central concept and having that concept drive your design decisions a little further would advance this product significantly. That said, I appreciate the fact that there are so many deep balconies and this creation of privacy. And, obviously, this is not a cheap building to build. None of these are cheap buildings to build, and none of them are copy paste iterations of each other. So I respect the effort that went into this. But I expect also to see a lot of refinement when we come back at whatever it is, 50% CDs or end of DDs. I mean, it's hard to put a really clear timeline on this.
Yeah.
Does this, from a procedural standpoint,
Yeah.
is this something that we would like to see in the same vein as the proposed tower at CWI, where it's not an outright denial, but it's also not necessarily a work session?
I mean, I think we can look at this. I mean, if we're in general agreement with the site and the concept and the approach, I guess, to the development, and we can ask them to come back. Guess what did we do on CWI now?
It was a deferral.
It was a deferral.
Yeah.
So they deferred them to come back with some additional information. So I guess the question is do we think it requires that? I think there's are details of what's happening with the mechanical screening systems that came up, window details and trim transitions between the materials, and that need to be presented. I guess, Mr. Stat, I guess if I'm listening to you correctly, is there a change in just general philosophy of the building massing that we think would not be acceptable, having them come back just through a work session with what's.
I would pose that question to other members of the commission.
Mr. Chair,
Yep. Yes,
Um,
Mr. Tatum.
to me, it's not a question of massing or of materials necessarily. It's just I feel like the building doesn't need to be reworked. It needs to be rethought. Like what is it? Like it doesn't have an identity, and it's trying to be a lot of things. And like I said, I know that we have a lot of rules, and it follows all the rules and then some. So like it does a really good job of that. It just doesn't look particularly interesting. And I think Trappers Island needs something really interesting. Like, and I don't, you know, I'm not the architect here. Like, I don't really care about the screening of the mechanicals right now or about the, you know, the relationship of the materials. I feel like that just the whole thing needs to be rethought. And like 4 buildings sounds like a good idea, but it's a question of like, what do the 4 buildings look like? Like, does each one need to be different? Do they all have to be the same? I don't think that's the point. I think the point is that like, it all needs to be awesome and not just slightly better than what the rules are asking it to be. And I know that's really hard to, you know, to write an action item around, but I feel like in this day and age, it should be understood that it's not low-income housing. We're not just trying to build something to get the units on the market. It needs to be better. Like the site just deserves better. So I'd like to come back and see just something, you know, I don't care if the interior is all the same. I just like to see something completely different from the outside that isn't making me wonder, you know, where are we? Like, are we in the forest? Are we in McCall? Are we in the city? Are we in suburbia? Like it needs to decide what it is.
You feel like it has a lack of identity, I guess?
Yes. It's like it has too many identities and therefore not really any.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I completely agree with Commissioner Zuckerman. I think like this is a spectacular site. And what's proposed is condos. I mean, you know, it's not affordable housing, it's not market rate multifamily. Like these are for sale condos. So you could make this incredible, right? And yeah, I think it's just it's a bit confused to me. Like I agree. It's like it doesn't really feel like it's in Boise. It feels like it should be in McCall or kind of a mountain market. And it's hard to pinpoint one thing for me. I mean, I particularly kind of keyed in on the roofs. I actually kind of prefer the gabled roof. I think you could do something really interesting with that, but I think it just needs to be more cohesive. It's just, yeah, it's very confused to me. The ironic thing is, and I feel like we're saying this a lot on some other applications, but like there's so many materials on this building. And so I don't view it as like a cost issue. I actually think you could really simplify this and actually probably decrease the cost. Because there's just so many different elements with the balconies and the roofs and all the different materials. But yeah, I think ultimately it's just like an unbelievable site that should have just an incredible design on it.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So just something for the commission to consider. I don't know that I personally would make a motion with a bunch of items like fix this and redo that and come back at 50% of DD or CDs. And I'm wondering if it's more appropriate, and I might need your help on this, Josh, is if we just defer it and you guys come back and it's still kind of fair game to
Present some new ideas.
present some new ideas, or maybe it is modifying what you showed us tonight. I guess I'm afraid if we give you specific conditions, it might put you more in a box instead of being more, have an opportunity for some creativity.
Mr. Chair, just as a point of order question.
Yeah, we're still closed. Does the commission wish to open this up and let the applicant speak?
Yes.
Is that
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll open up the public portion of the testimony and let you.
Thanks,
Go ahead.
thanks,
Please, if
Mr.
you
Chair.
would state your name.
Yeah,
address.
Heath Clark, 251 East Front Street in Boise, representing the applicant. So as many of you know, the design review process is somewhat of a challenge at times because it is a eye of the beholder process. It invites that kind of a concept. But what design review ultimately is it's still based on standards. And so when we look at each of these applications, the question is not, necessarily, am I wowed by it? I think, Mrs. Zuckerman, I think you hit the nail on the head. The question is, does it meet the standards, first of all? And then within those standards, is there direction that can be provided? So as the committee provides, those comments, I'd just ask that you keep that in mind. The applicant is also entitled to their preferences as to some of these styles. They're entitled to want it to look a particular way as long as it falls within the design review standards of the city. And so rather than having the project just redesigned from the dais, it needs to be really focused on the standards. And so we would ask for clear direction if there is going to be a deferral, and that direction be based on the code, not on personal preferences.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant? Yeah, I guess some comments. I mean, as much as you can have standards for a design review commission, there is a human element that, and the whole reason for the commission to be able to interpret and provide some of that feedback. So I don't think we're trying to necessarily design buildings by standards or code by prescriptive. So I think it's kind of a gray area in between, but I do encourage this commission for whatever we do next is to provide clear direction to the applicant on what we expect and be able to back that up.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Shred.
Question for city staff. This is under the new zoning code, correct? So this has been through the new process, right? As we've seen this at concept review, there's been the collaborative process throughout the city. Was there a unifying concept that was presented? And could you give us an idea of how that conversation goes? Just for our own edification and to understand kind of what's the administrative background on this and the process and the conversation that happens before it comes to us.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Erstad, so the process included like a concept review kind of informally with a staff person. And then there were IDR meetings with other agencies involved as well. So there were a lot of different people in the room with a lot of different opinions. So I would probably have to go back through the notes and see exactly what the comments were. But I know from like a design perspective, we did encourage providing a clear design concept, design kind of diagrams just to show the building concept. So I think that advice was given.
Thank you.
Applicant, have anything else?
So I would just ask, for whatever the motion may be, I think we as a team really do need some clear direction as to what you all are looking for to approve the project. And I'm hearing a lot of opinions, and they're good opinions. I will say that I'm chuckling back there because there was a strong desire to make this feel like a mountain modern development. And I think we did that with what I'm hearing the comments from this commission say. But I'm also hearing that this commission doesn't want or like mountain modern aesthetic, which I mean, I don't care, to be honest, right? I don't care what the aesthetic is as long as it can be built and it's high-end luxury condos. So part of the problem with me getting up here is there's no affordability around this at all. That is not the issue. I just think the issue is desire and aesthetic. So there was a strong desire from the owner and the ownership design team to create a mountain modern aesthetic. And so that was definitely the intent of this. And if that aesthetic doesn't work, I want to understand how to move this forward so that we can provide something that does work.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'd kind of like to echo the applicant and say, you know, I think we really do need to have some actionable items that come out of this, and it's not go back to the drawing board. I don't want to become one of our neighboring municipalities that says, here is your prescribed list of styles that you're allowed to build in, and you need to have X number of awnings, and you need to have X number of materials, and you had, you know, that's, this would be my last meeting if that were the kind of board and commission that we were. But I agree that we've not given the applicant a lot to work with as far as how to get this to what we perceive to be a meritorious product.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So I first just want to say, I don't have a personal opinion on Mountain Modern. I think it has its fans and it has its place. And I think that this site is not in the mountains, it's not in a resort town, and it's not in suburbia. So what I would ask for this site is that it has more of a singular identity, meaning I want to be able to tell someone like, hey, you should go check out the condos with the blue roof, or the, I don't know, you know, with the interesting pitch or whatever it is, like something that's identifiable about it, that doesn't make it look like just a nicer version of a standard McCall condo project, because we're not in McCall and there's nothing standard about this. I mean, you can tell by the nice materials that are put in. But so I would ask, you know, if we're asking for specific things, that I'd like to see some more unifying elements. I don't care if that's material, color, form, whatever it is. It's something that makes it look like it's all a part of one project. And at the same time, I'd love to see it stand out in some way. So I don't care what way that is, but you know, if it's material, color, shape, if it's all octagonal, I don't know, just something that makes it a little more interesting than anything else that's been built around there. And I understand our role as design review is to follow the design guidelines. But part of our commission's duty to the city is also to make sure that our built environment is what it can be. And the design guidelines are just a tool to get us there. So, yeah, and I agree with, I believe it was Chris who said that, you know, renderings aren't good. Like if there's anything I've learned from however many years I've sat here is that, yeah, the renderings never look as good as the final product. And I think we all know that. But even with that being said, I'd love to see the next set of renderings just more unified and more, if there are two things, be more unified and have more of a character of its own, whatever you'd want that character to be. So that we can't call it anything else, right? We can't call it McCall Modern. We can't call it, you know, Sun Valley Stone. We can't call it Modern Suburbia.
Can I ask?
Sure.
Do you mean project unifying just the buildings or the whole?
The whole project.
All of them, yeah.
Yeah.
So every building being similar, is that what I'm hearing?
Well, just relating to each other in a more unifying way. Is that?
Yeah, I think
I'm
maybe
sort of looking
there seems
around.
to be a lot going on in every single building.
Okay.
And so just making a little bit more of a cohesive design that kind of carries through from base to top and proportion wise, I think. Personally, I because that isolated in the kind of the forested environment there, I have no problem with the Mountain Modern and the pitch pieces to it. I think it has a true potential to have that unique architectural style we don't have here in Boise. If you could put a little urban flair to your Mountain Modern. But I guess coming back to the commission, I think we do need to make sure that we provide some real good, clear direction to that thing. But from the cohesiveness, I think that's where, if you look at a building elevation in whole, does it look like it's a single design, or does it look like a bunch of parts pieces that are put together that don't necessarily completely relate to each other? So I think that's part of the part where it gets a little bit lost.
Can I add something to
Sure.
that? I would like to know if the rest of the commission agrees. I think the site plan is solid. And I like how it relates to the green belt. I think the two plazas are really good. It looks like, it's all proportionate in how much open land there is and space. And, I think whoever gets to live there, the views are going to be phenomenal. And I think the size of it is going to look really good from the road, from Santa Americana. So I think all of that is really good. It's just, yeah, we need some identity and uniformity within the project.
Other questions for the applicants or comments? We still are an open, Patrick, something?
I don't know if this is possible. Maybe I might get a little too theoretical here, but I like to understand like why, okay, the owner loves Mountain Modern. Like, okay, that's fine. But it would be nice to have, perhaps it's like an exhibit or something where you call out each material and it's like, hey, this, we picked stone because it relates to the Boise River, or we picked green metal siding, because it matches the trees and the park next door, or just something to help us kind of understand like why we're using the materials we're using within the context of this project. And maybe it doesn't have to be the natural environment. Maybe you can relate it to the built environment of Boise. But yeah, I think if you could help the commission understand like what was the thought behind this, instead of just like, well, the owner likes Mountain Modern.
Right. Do you want me to do that now or what?
Could we
Yeah.
take a stab at it? Because perhaps we didn't explain it well. Is that possible now?
Yes, I mean, we're still open. Yeah, absolutely. If you want to take it, yeah, I mean, helping the building kind of tell its story, I think is certainly helpful.
I mean, I know our material palette was inspired by, we're in a riverbed, soil conditions, soil tones. We're in a canopy of different types of trees. Like I said, shadows on the building have been important to us. Textural changes are important. We're trying to bring warmth in our material palette. As an opinion of mine, charcoal brick is not something that we think is appropriate here. It doesn't really blend in. We have a red trestle bridge, so we're starting to, we're not trying to go for a bold look. We're not trying to stand out. We're trying to fit into our site and our surroundings in a non-obtrusive way, because there's a lot of different areas in this city that you're going to be looking back at our site. You own a home in the foothills, you're going to see this. You own a home on the bench, you're going to see this. You're in a downtown building, you're going to see it if it's somewhat tall. And so we are not trying to be a sore thumb in the cityscape. We're trying to blend in. We're not trying to distract from the river. We're trying to keep people's eyes on the river. And we want this to be a vibrant place that people and activity off of the Greenbelt into that plaza draw you in versus, look at the red building in the middle of the river. That's not what we're trying to do. And so, like I said, we're inspired by nature, soil tones, natural tones. We're not all natural, with the size of this building and the type of building it is. We're not shooting for wood. We're not shooting for, red brick. That's not the aesthetic of the West, in our opinion. As a design team, we're trying to bring, warmth in tones. We're trying to fit in. We're not trying to distract from essentially the ribbon of jewels, the green belt, everything that's amazing about what has been created along the river in our city. So that's kind of my feeling.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
so Chris, the story that you just told is compelling and I hear you, and that sounds really good. Is there a way to do that that's more cohesive within the project? Because yeah, I agree with you. It doesn't, I get that there's the bridge and I get that the river speaks for itself, but maybe if just simplifying the whole project and making it more cohesive, maybe that'll make it go away even more and make it sort of quietly striking. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it's something we can continue to explore and refine for sure.
Yeah, and I hear you. I mean, if your owner likes Mountain Modern, then, who am I to say that Mountain Modern isn't right here? I just think that it needs to be a non-confused like a streamlined Mountain Modern, especially if the idea is to blend in. Thanks.
And even with, I guess, some of these elevations, so if we took the top elevation under consideration, the base level and all of the upper levels, they don't seem to have anything that really tie each other together at all. There's just a couple of lines that particularly carry elements or relate from the top to the base. So it's almost like they're just two different buildings those are the kind of cohesive pieces that we kind of hope you could bring to kind of unify the building with all the plane changes and stuff. Again, I think the little pitch elements are some of the more interesting pieces that are on the architecture. I think the material palette is a nice palette, and I think you guys have a nice story of how that relates to the site. So I think it's just more of some of those architectural pieces of of how you bring the whole thing together to kind of read as a single project. That's probably challenging us. I think conceptually, I think what we are all in agreement that the site plan and the building placements and the general theory concept behind this is good. And so we'd like to see this move forward. So are there other thoughts or comments to the applicant?
Maybe just real quick, like looking at this north elevation, where we have the kind of the gabled roof section, like the green, if you just take that from bottom to top, like I really like that look. And then, yeah, it's just like the roof form going flat from there just totally changes. So I think my comment would be definitely, revisit the roof structure across the board.
Are there any members of the public wishing to testify to this? Seeing none here. Any online, Josh? No? Any last comments or questions for the applicant before we close this? Any last comments from the applicant before we close? Okay, thank you. We'll close it and bring it back to the commission for final discussion and for a motion.
Mr. Chair.
Yep, Mr. Stead.
I don't know that any of our discussion really constitutes a condition of approval. So I would move that we defer DRH 24-00118 to the July 10th. Is that correct? 12th. 10th commission meeting.
To address
the discussion in all its glory and review revisions, I suppose.
Okay, we got a motion. Questions on the motion?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Aguilar.
I'm going to look at the applicant here. What if it's not deferred, and this might be just semantics, if they come back at design development, taking into and this isn't a alternate proposal or motion, this is just to maybe start another conversation. If they came back at design development, taking into consideration some of the comments heard today, and if that's the direction this goes, we can try and articulate those better. And I guess I would like to see, I know they showed some materials here, but it looks like, and I know it's tough with these renderings, that they're just graphics from wherever their source is, and they're not necessarily a picture or an image from like the actual manufacturer of the product, like the rib metal siding, for example. And again, it just like they look like graphics, and I wonder if we just had better information, like the actual vendors here, what they're proposing in terms of the materials. Just want to throw that out there as an alternate solution, maybe.
So we still don't have a second on the motion, so we have an open motion. Is there,
Well, I could
You wanna
amend my motion to include the presentation of physical material copies at the next meeting presentation.
still seeing no second?
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Let's discuss the motion. I guess the only other question I would have is do we need to actually in this motion, I know we kind of referred them back to our discussion, but that we need to, applicant needs to come back with a more cohesive design and material samples, details on finishes, et cetera. Alternately, I think we could perform a site and conceptual approval and have them come back with new elevation pieces. I guess the questions from development standpoint is giving them the assurance that we're in support of their project so that they can feel like they can kind of move forward that with the general
Mr. Chair,
conception. Yes.
to kind of address Commissioner Aguilar's discussion of, design phase and the progression of the design through those phases as it relates to when we'd like to see this again. I feel fairly confident in speaking for this commission that we're not opposed to the materiality. We're not opposed to the style. What we'd like to see is further refinement. And within that, I think as long as the applicant is comfortable with progressing with their design, it doesn't really impact our decision as to if that's, 100% DD or 25% CDs. Like, I think we will know if our request has been satisfied when we see the next presentation.
Yeah, I mean, we can defer it to the next month. Chances are that's pretty soon. And I know we can defer again if the applicant's not ready next month, if they need more time.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Ms. Aguilar.
I guess my intent was to give them a way to move forward. But at the same time, it's a significant investment, with architecture that at some point they're going to have to engage their MEP folks. And I think they sense that we're not super happy with what we're seeing today, but I think we can make forward progress. But at the same time, I don't want them to, or I guess it's up to them, feel like they have to make this huge investment and they come back and we still like, no, you need to do more or change this or change that. And so I'm trying to figure out what is that to keep moving. They need to come back. But again, just being mindful and respectful of the economics that it takes to do this type of project.
Commissioner Aguilar, I think the question then is, did we provide enough feedback, and did we do our job well at providing feedback so that the applicant can be successful next time in getting our approval? And I hope we did. I don't know. Because I agree. I don't want to ask I know that it's expensive and both delaying things and, spending more architecture hours. But I also don't want that. I don't want to just say, okay, I recognize it costs you a lot. Let's just go for it. So, yeah, but I guess, Mr. Chair, the question is, well, as chair, do you think that we've given enough direction?
I just want to make sure our motion just includes enough information. I mean, obviously there's enough public record here to kind of have them go back and kind of revisit what we're requesting, but I'm not sure if we have a real clear motion at the time. I know we have a motion in a second, but I don't know. Can we read back the motion? Does anybody have? Or Ryan, do you think you could restate the motion that we have on?
I moved to defer to July 10th. And at that meeting, we expect the presentation of materials and physical materials. And that was pretty much the extent of the hard direction included in there. Because again, I don't think our discussion really produced true direction from a specific standpoint.
I think, are we trying to allow the applicant to present a refined design?
Yes. It's the request is a design progression based off of the feedback that's been received today. Specific to the exterior, but as it manifests the floor plans.
Right.
I mean, it's a unified thing, right? You can't just change the exterior and not have the interior impacted. You can't just move things around the interior and not have the exterior impacted. So, I think that to say that this is specific to the exterior of the building would be misleading. I think that what we're looking for is updated floor plans as they drive updated elevations, as they drive updated renderings. Am I wrong in that, or am I right in that?
Mr. Commissioner, I think the point is that we, as a commission, had no issue with the current floor plans and with the current site plan. And that.
Correct. I mean, from the high level, right?
Right.
I think our issue is, the floor plans create everything. And so if we have a fundamental issue with the way that these buildings are expressing themselves or not, then that kind of does come back to the floor plan. We're not asking for a revision of unit counts. We're not asking for a revision of,
use
or anything like that. As the buildings hit the ground, we like that. As they relate to each other, we like that. But as the floor plans themselves create a visual, and that visual presence, I think we take exception to it.
I guess more specifics, for example, the floor plans are pretty loose still. I mean, they're more blocks of color.
Right.
They seem very conceptual and not particularly refined. So just again, I think as you stated, the applicant to progress the design, both exterior and floor plan wise, with additional detail and cohesiveness. at the next hearing. So we had a motion. We have a second by Dana.
Yes.
Any further discussion before we call the roll? All right, hearing none. Christina, will you please call the roll?
Marsh,
Aye.
Aguilar,
Aye.
Zuckerman,
Aye.
Erstad,
Aye.
Bull,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
All right, thank you. And that concludes our items for tonight. And with that, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.